Welcome all. My name is Michael Downey and it's fantastic to be here for another AWRI webinar. This is the third session for the 2019-20 program. In our first two sessions, we covered weeds in the vineyard and frost forecasting tools. Next week's session takes a look at maceration techniques for tailoring wine style in reds. Today, however, we'll be exploring an exciting new application called GAIA, developed by Consilium Technology in partnership with Digital Globe and Wine Australia, that provides insight into the health and identification of vineyards across Australia using advanced machine learning and high-res satellite imaging. It's great that we've got someone here who can explain what all that means, but before we jump over to our speaker for today, a couple of quick reminders for you, the audience. To provide a comment or to ask a question, please open the Q&A part of the toolbar, type in your question and click to send it through. If you'd like to get involved through Twitter, please use the Twitter handle @_AWRI. The session is also being recorded and will be available to view later this afternoon by the AWRI's YouTube channel. Registrants will receive a link tomorrow to view this recording. For those of you that have just joined us, welcome. Today's webinar takes a look at GAIA, a new app to locate vineyards, store information, and monitor crop health. I'm very pleased to welcome our speaker. In the room with me today is Sandy Hathaway, an analyst in the market insights team at Wine Australia. Sandy has been involved in the Australian wine sector for more than 20 years and has been working at Wine Australia since 2016. Sandy, it's great to have you here to speak about and demonstrate the GAIA app. And with that, I'll hand over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Michael. And hello, everyone out there in webinar land. As Michael said, I'll talk today about GAIA and the National Vineyard Scan, which sounds a bit like a science fiction movie. And perhaps that's not too far from the truth, because it's certainly using very leading edge technology, machine learning, computer algorithms. So the National Vineyard Scan is actually part of a bigger Wine Australia research project called VinSights, which is, its main objective is to get a really good foundation data set of all the vineyards in Australia, including where they are and what they are by variety and their area. The National Vineyard Scan is the first part of that, and we engaged Consilium Technology to do the National Vineyard Scan on our behalf, and that included developing this very sophisticated computer model that could look at satellite imagery and analyse it and detect vineyards by looking at the imagery. So this is automated and remote and doesn't require anyone to fill in any forms, which is a great thing. But did require, a significant amount of computing to develop this algorithm. So the National Vineyard Scan for 2018 has just been published earlier this year, and that's the output of that first run with the GAIA algorithm. And there were three key outputs: the report, which is the statistical information, some maps which show the location of vineyards, and then the app, which enables growers to interact with those vineyard blocks. And I'm going to look at each of those in this presentation. So the first thing is the Vineyard Scan report. And based on the scan, we found that there are 146,128 hectares of vineyards in Australia. Now, if those of you who are familiar with this sort of information, our last report from the ABS had 135,000 hectares. So the methodologies are very different, but if you did compare them directly, that would suggest there's been about an additional 10,000 hectares planted since the last ABS report, which was in 2015, which would be consistent with anecdotal reports of some slow and steady planting in certain areas, offset by a few removals elsewhere. So looking at those results in a little more detail, and I'm not going to read out all these numbers, don't worry. But what happens in each case is that the algorithm scans a total area, which you can see overall was over 5 million hectares. and then detects vineyards within each of the scan areas, and it came out with that figure of 146,000. You can see there's a plus or minus figure, which is not something we would have talked about in the days of the ABS, but there would have again been an error rate with a survey conducted, even though supposedly it was compulsory and everyone's supposed to fill it in, still not perfectly accurate. So here we actually compared the algorithm results with a small sample area that was manually labelled. So a human looked at it and accurately detected where the vineyards were. And comparing the performance of the computer program with the hand labelling showed that it was 95% accurate, which is pretty good. And that's where that figure comes from. But we're happy to stick with that as the central figure of 146,000 hectares. And the other thing we found, through the algorithm, which we've never known before, is actually the length of vine rows. And that's never been measured before, and that comes out, as you can see, at just under 462,000 kilometres. This shows you an example from Tasmania of where the algorithm scanned. And so it's important to note that the algorithm didn't scan the whole of Australia, which is about 800 million hectares. It scanned what are called areas of interest, where we pretty much believe from existing knowledge that that's where there are vineyards. So all those coloured squares are where the aerial imagery was selected from, that was scanned. So it's still a pretty small area, although it's much, much bigger than the area of vineyards found. But yeah, it's important to note that if there were vineyards planted in a completely new area that no one had any intel on, we probably wouldn't have picked them up. Now, when you look at this vine row length information, that then opens up all sorts of new doors to what information we can find out. So, based on the length of 463,718 kilometres, we can estimate that there are somewhere around 232 million vines in the ground. That's based on a 2-metre spacing. Which if you value it at $3 a vine on average is $694 million. And similar sort of workings, you can work out perhaps how many posts there are, how many kilometres of drip line, all those sorts of things. Why would you do that? I guess resource allocation. One of the first things our research manager asked me for was this length statistic, and she was calculating how many hours it would take for a tractor to drive theoretically up all the rows of vineyards in Australia if it were doing yield estimation through a sort of on-tractor mounted camera type of arrangement. So there's all sorts of applications for this that we don't even know about yet. Another statistic for interest is that, if you've got the row length and you've got the area, you can calculate the vine density, not in terms of vine spacing, but in terms of row spacing. And so those two tables show you on the left the regions with the highest vine density on average, and on the right the regions with the lowest vine density. So particularly important, I'll take a step back there, sorry. Those statistics are really important. They line up against the ABS figures that we used to get, but we stopped getting in 2015. It's really important that we have this foundation data set, and it was really important that we could replace it with such an accurate alternative methodology that also doesn't require growers to fill in any surveys. It's all automated from a distance. And of course, the extra thing is, apart from the vine rows, it also gives us the actual locations of the vineyards, which we would never have got from the ABS surveys. So we know where vineyards are within regional boundaries, but also specifically where they are on the land. So this image that you can see here shows you that the little blue polygons are the vineyards detected by GAIA, and then the green boundaries are GI boundaries. So those particular two are Percolban and Broke Forditch in the Hunter Valley. And the interesting thing we found in this particular example was that almost all vineyards in the Hunter are contained within the 3 subregions, those two and Upper Hunter Valley, which was something we hadn't known before, and most wine that comes out of the Hunter is labelled as Hunter, not those subregions, but in fact the vineyards are all concentrated there. So this information is really useful, partly for label integrity. If you cannot put a region on a wine label if you can't prove that the wine comes from vineyards in that particular region. So this is very helpful in ensuring that you've got label integrity. But there are other applications like biosecurity, quarantine, vineyard management. You can superimpose things like soil maps, contour maps, climate maps on this and look at how vineyards relate to those other variables. And then governments are very interested in the information for land management, such as, burn-offs, smoke taint, bushfires. Just knowing the location of vineyards is critical. So the one thing we haven't really got at this stage is variety. So we've got the areas and we know where they are, but we don't know what variety they are. That's the one sort of missing link at the moment. These show you and this is, I said to you, the second output of the National Vineyard Scan is we've been able to take those vineyard locations and produce maps. So these are a couple of examples where you can see how the vineyards are distributed around their particular GI. And if people are interested in these, they can you can download these maps. At the moment, they are contained within our National Vintage Report on our website, but the plan is to upload them individually on the website as well, so you can download them all. There's another couple of examples here. You've got Tasmania and the Mornington Peninsula. Again, just showing different distributions within their GIs. All right, and then the third area, as I said to you, is the GAIA interactive app. So now GAIA, I've been using that term. GAIA is the name of the computer program that did the vineyard detection, and it's also the name of the app that you use to look at the National Vineyard Scan. GAIA stands for Geospatial Artificial Intelligence for Agriculture, but also Gaia is the Greek goddess of Mother Earth, so it's just a really nice name that fits well with what its role is in life, if you like. So this is an interactive, purpose-built web interface. It's not an app that you download from the App Store for your phone. It's run through a web browser. It's been developed, designed, and it's owned by Consilium Technology. So with the arrangement that Wine Australia had with Concilium, or has with Consilium Technology, we part-funded the research to develop the algorithm, and we pay them a license fee so that our stakeholders can use the app. So winegrape levy payers and wine levy payers can access this app at no additional charge, although there are additional features that they can pay for on top of the things that are free, which I'll show you. So you can use this to look at the results of the National Scan. You can use it for individual vineyard health monitoring and data storage, and it's got the potential to integrate with other tools that can help with vineyard decision making. All right, so I'm now going to go on and give a demonstration of the app itself. So if you'll bear with me, I'll switch over to a web interface. Right, so what we're looking at on the screen now is the GAIA app. This is what you see after you've logged in, and I'll mention the login at the end. So I'm logged in, and when I start, I mean, depends where you left the app last time, but you can see that that's the whole of Australia. What you're looking at here, you've got GI zones, and as I slide my mouse over them, the information bar down here on the left tells me what zone I'm in, which is handy. It's the peninsulas. So these are the zones. The purple is a heat map. So this is actually showing you where there are vineyards detected by GAIA, but at this resolution, you wouldn't see them if it was just the individual blocks. So we've put a heat map over the top so that you can see roughly where they are. The other thing you might be able to detect is these green blocks. Those are blocks that are claimed by or owned by a particular organisation. So if you're logged in, you have an organisation, and any blocks that are claimed by your organisation will show up slightly differently, and in the heat map they show up as these green blocks. So here in the menu panel, you can see that's my organisation. And in addition to my organisation, there's a demo organisation which everyone can see. And those blocks mainly are associated with the demo organisation. Okay, so I'm just seeing what to show you here. Oh, this here is the National Scan Vineyard. So if I want to, I can actually turn that off, turn it back on again. And there are some other tools which I'll show you in a second. But first of all, I'll zoom in. And as you zoom in, see that at a certain zoom, the green region boundaries become evident. So now we can see in that information bar that not only is this in the Big River zone, it's also in the Riverina region. So you can orient to where you are in terms of GI regions using that bar. And as we get closer and closer in, eventually the heat map resolves into the individual polygons. This is now showing you the individual vineyards as detected by GAIA. If I want to, I can switch to a street view, just depending on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to work out where things are in a street, you could switch to that or have the satellite view. You might want to have a look at a particular block. If you want to see what's underneath that block, you can turn the National Scan off again and have a look at the base layer. It is important to note, though, that this is a Google base layer. It is not the imagery that was used by GAIA in detecting the vineyard. So what that means is that it might be slightly different, especially, say, if a vineyard had been removed, the base layer might look different from what the imagery looked like when GAIA scanned it. So there won't be a perfect alignment there. Something else I can do is use this locate button this will make us all a bit seasick, but this is now going to basically position me where I am right now, where there probably aren't any actual vineyards. This is useful if you are using GAIA on a mobile app and you're actually in the vineyard and you want to see where a particular area is. Depending on the accuracy of your locating device on your phone, this will show you where you are. So while I'm here, here's a block. If I click on that block, it's telling me it's a National Scan block, and this is its area. It's in the Mount Lofty Ranges, and it's just over a hectare. And you'll see the option to copy it, which I'm going to do in a minute. But the other thing just to emphasize, there's no ownership details on this. And there's certainly we don't have any confidential information. If a grower puts in information about their own block, that is not visible to anybody who is looking at the National Scan. So the search bar enables you to go and find a block somewhere. So I'm going to New South Wales. The reason I've done that is that these blocks that are outlined in green are the demo organisation. So and it is a real wine company that's been kind enough to allow us to use some of their information for the purposes of demonstrating how this works. So again, here's a block which I'll click on. This is telling me, again, its area. It's also telling me there's imagery available for it, which I'll show you in a minute. And then you'll see there's a lot more information here. So once vineyards are claimed by an organisation, you can then add information to them. So if I turn on now what's called the planting layer, you'll see that now this information has come up, but this is only available would normally only be available to the person logged in who is associated with that organisation. It just happens that the demo organisation is publicly available. If we go to there's the Merlot, that particular block there, and you'll see there's a lot of information being entered, and all this is controlled by the grower, whatever you want to put in really. And you can further edit it, you can change boundaries, that sort of thing. So if you have a look and you see that, a block has been drawn by the National Vineyard Scan and it's your block, or it's just a block that you're interested in, you can click on that block and you can copy it to your organisation. So I'm going to copy this one to Wine Australia. Right, so that block is now in my level. So if I now turned off Wine Australia, I wouldn't see that block anymore. Turn it back on again. So that's my block. I can adjust the boundary of that block. So if perhaps, because GAIA is not perfect, and some of the boundaries, there's a boundary here, you can see it looks a little odd around the edge. As I said, remember that at the national scan level, it's 95% accurate, which is pretty good. But you might look at one boundary and think, well, that's not quite right. And you can adjust the boundary for your own purposes if you want to. So if I adjust this boundary, oh, gee, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that here. I'll do something different, but let's leave that there. And what I'll do instead is I'll make this a sub block. The reason I've done that is adjusting these boundaries can be tricky because there are lots of individual points all the way around a national scan block, but that is a feature that's about to be upgraded that's going to make it easier. So on here, I'm going to add a sub block. I'm going to add it to the planting layer. So now I can add information to that. So first thing I'll do is, you know, I know that this part here is a particular variety. So I'll make this a sub block and I'll identify that as Chardonnay. And as you can see, I can add other information if I want to. I'll just leave it at that. So that is now Chardonnay, and you can see it's labelled as that. So what I've done there is I've claimed a block that was in the National Vineyard Scan. I've shown that it's now, I've put it in my layer, and then you can use all this sort of information to help manage your block. And all this is freely available to growers under the Wine Australia licence. The other thing you might want to do is you might say, this is actually a vineyard and GAIA has missed it, but it's my vineyard and I want to put it in my layer. So I will put a pin on it and I will create a block here. So don't worry, it's not going to look like that for long. I'm going to go there, I'm going to adjust the boundary and move it like this. And then say that I'm happy with that. And then once again, I could add a sub block to it, add planting information. You can have other information like vigor or watering or who the winery is that the block's going to. Regional associations could use this. I mean, you don't actually have to own any block that you claim. You might identify all the blocks in a region that are known to be older than, you know, planted prior to 1950, and that might be a regional association sort of historical database that you might manage. There's lots of applications for this information. Now, the last thing I want to show you is here, back to my demo block or demo organisation. When you click on a particular block, you can see that it says, excuse me, it says that imagery is available, and this is then goes into the commercial features that you can add to your subscription. It's $30 a hectare to get NDVI imagery of your block. So if I turn this imagery on, you'll see what it looks like. So this is the imagery for the demo organisation displayed like that. All right, so that is what I wanted to show you in terms of the demo. It probably gets a little bit boring to go into too much detail, but there's a number of features that you play around with. So I guess the next question is going to be, how do you get onto GAIA? So I'm just going to come back to the presentation. So to use GAIA, as I said, if you are a levy payer, you have access to this under our subscription. You need to go to GAIA, you need to create a login, You need to demonstrate that you're a levy payer by uploading a levy receipt. The way it works is there's one kind of account per organisation. So whoever signs up first for, you know, Ocean View Vineyard, then that first person's the account manager, and they can sign up to 10 users within their own organisation once they've done that. At the moment, if you want to sign up, what I invite you to do is register here on this web address, projectgaia.ai. There's a register now button. You'll send your email address through, and then you'll get an email with instructions on how to sign up. Or you can contact me effectively and the Market Insights team, and we can also sign you up. And then there is going to be a self-sign-up facility. It's basically done, but we're just making sure that there's enough sort of clear instructions around that people don't get caught up in a complicated sort of an annoying situation when they're trying to sign up. So that self-sign-up facility, we're just making that sure that that's a smooth experience, and that'll be launched by the end of next week. And that's pretty much it for me. Thank you very much. And yeah, are there any questions?
Okay, great. Thank you, Sandy, for providing some information around GAIA and also walking through a really nice demonstration of what it can do. So Sandy's going to stick around for a little while to answer any questions that you may have. So if you do have a question, whether it's regarding the development of the app or some of the features, please start sending through a question. Just a reminder to ask a question, just open the Q&A part of your webinar toolbar and type your questions in. Okay. So we do have one question here, Sandy, and it's around whether the app is available to non-levy payers in some capacity, whether that be consultants, journalists, etc.
At this stage, no, or not under the Wine Australia license. So I would register interest through that same URL, and when you are then contacted by Concilium, because you'll nominate that you're not a levy payer, then they can talk to you about what your options are. And yeah, there is an intention to have a service for non-levy payers, but because that's a part of a commercial business model that Concilium are developing, I don't know the details of that and when it will be rolled out and what it will cost. But depending on what you need, the maps that we've produced at a regional level, they are PDFs, they're not interactive, but they do show all the vineyard locations, and those are freely available on our website.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. We've got a question here about how often the imagery is updated.
That's a really good question. And when you look in the app and you see that little message that says imagery is available for this block, you know, update your subscription or whatever, as I understand it, and Concilium would be able to give you a perfectly accurate answer, but as I understand it, if you think of a library of aerial imagery that is actually taken by Digital Globe, there's a different amount of imagery and different dates for different regions. So if you have an annual subscription for your particular block, it might be that area gets flown 3 times in a year or only once, or if you're really unlucky, it hasn't been flown for 2 years. Or not flown, I suppose it's satellite imagery, but in that case, you'll get that information specifically for your block and you'll decide whether that's often enough for you. So I'm afraid the answer is that it's basically variable according to where you are, depending on the schedule of imagery that's taken by Digital Globe. And you can actually insert your own imagery. So if you've got imagery from elsewhere, you can upload the file into your account with GAIA so that you can look at that or other various shape type files. You can look at those overlaid on your GAIA account.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. I've got a question here about the vine health features. Can you speak a little bit more about what exactly the features are there and how that works exactly?
I take it you mean the crop health monitoring, or what we're saying is that this app has the ability to assist you in managing vine health in the first instance. And I mean, technology is such that the potential for this is huge. If you've got this NDVI imagery, you can use it to see where you've got parts of your block that are high vigor and parts that are low vigor. We know that vigor variation is a disadvantage and generally means less yield or less good quality overall. So if you can use this imagery to manage the vigor on your block, it may be that you look at an area and it's particularly low vigor. Maybe it's as simple as a blocked irrigation nozzle, or maybe there's another reason for it. Concilium are working with Plat Farm, which some of you probably know about, and that has the ability to actually convert this imagery into a pattern for mulching that enables you to mulch your lower vigor areas more than your higher vigor areas. And so that's an integration that's more about that second stage where you use this information to actually change and improve your vine health. But some of those features are a bit down the track. In the short term, what we're talking about here is imagery and how you use that imagery to manage your block.
Okay, great. Thanks for your question there, Jeff. Hopefully that's provided some more insight. Sandy, can you describe whether GAIA, or how it determines wine grapes from table grapes?
GAIA is not currently able to differentiate between wine grapes and table grapes, but we are working on that. So in the National Vineyard Scan, there has been some manual work done to eliminate vineyards that we know are table grapes, and we've used other sources of information to get that. Particularly that sunrise mapping in the Murray-Darling area has really good imagery, or a mapping service that shows which is which. And so there has been manual work done there. That's not really sort of efficient in the long term. We are hoping that GAIA will be able to differentiate. If we get the imagery at the right time when table grapes are covered in a particular way, then that will help. But essentially a vineyard is a vineyard, so it's a pretty fine differentiation. But it's in the long-term plan, as is, hopefully variety detection, but that is again part of a longer-term plan and wouldn't necessarily be built in here because it may be that industry doesn't want that information to be displayed. But it would be helpful statistically to know what the total area by variety is in a region.
Okay, there have been a couple of questions around the $30 per hectare option. Can you speak a little bit more about what levy payers can get out of that? Someone has also asked whether there's any professional interpretation of data with that.
I think those would be good questions to put to Concilium. The sort of standard pricing is, which you can see on their website. So if you just go to that URL that I gave you before for registering, then you will see that the overall homepage of the website, and there's a sheet called pricing. You can look at that, and it's a discounted price at the moment. And for that price, what you get is this NDVI imagery, and you get it updated as often as it is updated for your particular area of interest. There's no professional interpretation of that. You would then take that to your consultant for further interpretation.
Okay, can you speak to the resolution of the NDVI?
I'm sorry, I can't. I'm afraid that's just too technical for me. I apologise, but do get in contact with Concilium through their website with those sorts of questions. Remember that you can, if you're a levy payer, you can register for GAIA and create an account and use the annotation features, the claiming of a block, all those things that I've shown you. And then you'll see you can then explore changing your subscription, and once you're in, you can communicate directly with Concilium as to, as you would with any product, what you will get for your money, and all the detailed specifications.
Okay, something to follow up there, Paul. Got a question here about an earlier slide of yours, Sandy. Perhaps you could bring up your slideshow again. And it's in relation to, okay, so the question is, your earlier slide seemed to show much bigger area for Australia than actual. So scanned area versus area of vineyards. Any chance of showing the Australian and state vineyard areas of viticulture again, please?
Okay, I think this is the slide then that you're interested in. So this is the total area scanned, and I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this report is on our website. In fact, there are two reports. There's a summary report, and then there's a full report which goes into full detail about the methodology. It documents all the scanned areas like this that show you the areas of interest, as well as the statistics and the methods of quality assurance that are used. So if you go to our website and you look under grape and wine production, you'll find the National Vineyard Scan there, and you'll find these reports. So yeah, it's a 5 million hectares scanned, which is pretty good. And then sort of something like 3% of that area turned out to be vineyards.
Yeah, I think that's cleared it up. Thanks, Peter. If you do have any follow-up questions to that, send it through. Got a question here about whether you think the imagery is influenced by inter-row cover crops and weeds. Do you have any insight around that, Sandy?
The imagery, or the NDVI imagery, or the, okay, again, I'm afraid that's way above my pay grade, or at least it's too technical for me, the analysis of NDVI imagery, but there is a lot written and a lot of people who are very experienced in the interpretation of that imagery. So I'd encourage you to follow up in that way. I think there's definitely two things here. There's the use of this particular app, and then there's the use of NDVI imagery to help you manage your block. And you may have already explored that, or you may be considering it. That would be a decision you make about your block management. If you think that that is worthwhile, the GAIA app is a convenient way that you can have that imagery sort of, you know, you can order that imagery for your block and then display it in a convenient way on your screen. But that's not to say it's the only way you can get that imagery.
Okay. Got a question about whether there's capability to overlay other information such as underground pipelines, for example, that will allow this information to be shared between users in the same organisation.
Absolutely, and that's going to be the beauty of it, that all users within an organisation will see the same information. Just as today, we were all effectively users in the demo organisation, and if I had created a new block or sub-block in that demo organisation, then that block would be available to everyone else who is linked as a user to that organisation. As for inserting other layers, if you have a GeoJSON file that shows this, then you would be able to upload it and look at it. Although at the moment that is a transient thing. So in other words, every time you want to look at it, you have to kind of re-upload it. I'm not sure whether there are other ways. I believe you would have to speak to Concilium, but I believe there are other ways that you would be able to incorporate other information into your account so that you could continue to look at it. And the other thing I would like to say at this point is this is new, and you may think that's frustrating or you may think it's exciting. I think it's actually great, because right now you might find that it hasn't got everything you want, but now is the time to say, well, you know, we want this, and to really help develop this app, because that's what's happening now, is it's being developed in order to be of most use to most users. So, you know, if there are features that you think would be useful, then you feed that through to Concilium, and that may well be built into the app. There has been a sort of 12-month period called a beta, where there have been some guinea pigs, if you like, who have had accounts on GAIA, and they have contributed to where it is now. But now that we're opening it to a wider group, we expect to get a lot more feedback and be able to build in a lot more features.
Okay, great. So I guess the take home is jump on and have a go, and if you've got any feedback, yeah, it will be received. Just a quick follow up there. Is it possible to share data between organisations or accounts?
What you do there, I think, is you invite a person who is technically in a different organisation, but you invite them to be a user on your account. So apart from the fact that you're limited to 10 seats, you could invite, for example, your vineyard consultant or your winery GLO to be a user on your account.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. It's been a few messages. Yeah, just indicating a lot of interest and value. So I think there's a bit of excitement around getting out there and using this application. Did you want to make any final comments before we wrap up, Sandy?
Yes, please. Thank you, Michael. And yes, I would like to say thank you. I mean, even just from those questions, it's great to see that level of interest. Thank you to everyone who has joined in. And yeah, please do keep in touch. I mean, Wine Australia's just trying to make this happen for our sector. So we're very keen to receive feedback to make this the best it can be. Concilium, of course, want to make it a successful commercial model that will serve the industry and that, you know, people will want to pay for because it will have benefits. So please do give it a go and keep your feedback coming in. And I think it is really, really exciting. The potential for it to add to other things is amazing now.
Great. Thanks for your final comments there, Sandy, and thanks very much for coming in and providing our audience a really fantastic demonstration and a lot of information around this application. I'd also like to thank you, the audience, for logging in and joining and participating today. For attendees, you'll receive a follow-up email with a link to this recording. I might also include the link to the GAIA app that Sandy had in one of her earlier slides. The next AWRI webinar is on Thursday, the 3rd of October. Dr. Karen Bindon from the Australian Wine Research Institute will be looking at a range of maceration techniques and how these treatments can impact sensory attributes and style for reds. If you'd like to register for this and you haven't done so already, please visit the AWRI website. That's all for today. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you at the next AWRI webinar.